I'm Sarah Russell.
I'm J.Q. Walker.
I'm Hind, and we are
The Neurodivergent Report, a research-based podcast by and for neurodivergent brains.
In each episode, we'll explore topics relating to neurodiversity and coping strategies by reviewing the literature and discussing current topics.
We will also have interview episodes where we sit down with experts in the field and listeners like you, with the hope that together we can all learn to heal in community.
However you are able to engage, thank you for being here. Amazing. Okay. Hello. My name is Sarah Russell, and I am the host of the Neurodivergent Report. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Our guest is Seif-Eldeine. Seif is a neurodivergent and award-winning poet whose work spans personal topics from mental health to war in Syria. So, Seif, thank you so much for being here. I'm extremely excited to talk to you. You can see from my face.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here, and it's just I've been interested in mental health for a long time. I'm working in the mental health field as a TMS technician, which is a machine that in the US is approved for depression treatment, and it's very effective. It's more effective than any medication out there.
Oh,
But
totally. I want to
also
talk
over
about TMS a little bit later, too. We're going to go into that again for
Okay.
sure. Sorry, I did forget to include it in my introduction, but it's so hard to sum up a neurodivergent individual in like a sentence or two because we're really just out here doing all the things.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that's sort of why I'm so excited to talk to you, right? Because you're like a creative, but you also work sort of in this like science sort of helping profession. Yeah, it's just like you're just super interesting.
Thank you.
Welcome. So I don't even know. Yeah, I think I'm just going to ask you about your diagnosis journey to start because, yeah, most of us neurodivergents are interested in mental health and we just like want to understand why our brains are and why other people's brains are. So when did you sort of become self-aware enough, I guess, to realize neurodivergence was a thing for you?
So the very first thing that happened, and it was quite young, is I would lose my clothes or lose my schoolwork or have trouble keeping attention during class. So the first thing that came up was ADD.
Yep.
And then I started either treating that or treating bipolar, which that diagnosis came later by
As it
smoking.
does.
Yeah. So the ADD usually comes pretty young. Sometimes it can get overdiagnosed because it's your prefrontal cortex is like your executive functioning of the brain.
Mhm.
So that doesn't fully develop until you're like 25, 26 years old. So when you're diagnosing children with ADD, you got to be very careful about it.
Totally.
But it was definitely something I had. I just had trouble keeping organized like with anything, and I still do. And then
That's a really important sign is that it's persistent through different phases of the life, you know, so you had this trouble as a kid and as a teen and now you're a man. I think.
Yeah. So in terms of treating it, I'm not taking controlled substances because of the interaction with bipolar.
Tell
Sometimes
me
that makes
tell me about your personal experience with that because I'm sure people would want to know, like personally
Yes.
curious.
So I started treating the ADD like with substances, specifically marijuana. It really helped me calm down. But then I got more and more addicted to it. At college, I was smoking like all day, every day. And I was starting with the controlled substances. I had to go off the controlled substances because they started making me paranoid.
Sort of like
And
the
then I
stimulant
went to,
medications, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Then I went to the Middle East, to specifically to Lebanon and Syria, when I was 22, and I was smoking hash every day, which is like a really concentrated form of
Yes, of the THC,
of the
right?
THC. And I one day, I it was my 23rd birthday. I was on Effexor for depression because I was like homesick and I had a breakup. I was smoking the hash and I was drinking, and all of those combined to give me like a psychosis. And I thought I was Jesus Christ and my brother was the devil, in that in order to save my brother from hell, that I had to kill myself to sacrifice myself for my brother. But the next morning I woke up still thinking I was Jesus, and it was a very sunny day, which is like for mood disorders. Sometimes during sunny days you get more manic, during the winter months you get more depressed. For me the real trouble is the mania and not the depression. So I started walking around the city in like 100-degree weather, 105-degree weather, and it was really sunny out, and I refused. My friends tried to get me inside, but I refused because I thought they were working with secret police to get me into prison, and they called my father, and my father came from the US to Lebanon and brought me back. I survived a 14-hour plane flight without an incident. I don't know how that happened, how I
Dosed
kept in the
you.
right mind.
It gave you like poppy or something to put you to sleep. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm just gonna sit for a minute with your story because I want to thank you, first of all, for sharing that with me. I'm practically a stranger,
Yeah.
but not anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have reached a point in my life where I sort of snapped a little bit, but I think my experience was obviously different. I love your father
Yeah, he
for
is so
loving
great.
you. Not all of us have parents like that. That's so special.
Yeah, my parents are great.
I
They've
wonder
always been.
if it runs in the family of sorts, because I mean, research indicates that it does
Yeah,
to
it's
degrees. The sort of what we know about the outcomes for people with, bipolar or even schizophrenia is that it's really a lack of resources and support, I think, early enough also that really that's sort of what we think of when we think of, oh, they're bipolar, like, oh, they must be severely disabled, like, oh, they must be like a nutcase. Like schizophrenia is another strong one that evokes like very big imagery of like a straitjacket, you know? But it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be that way. Like I know people who have those that are just normal, basic, albeit like a little bit forgetful people.
yeah.
Like you can't get around without using GPS, but so what? So what? We have that adaptive technology now. So is it really dysfunctional in this society? Or are we sort of only just viewing it that way?
So
There's
for me
yeah,
here's for
jet
me
changes.
the big thing is, it can be, obviously in my case it was dysfunctional, but
Yeah.
I was doing things like
Clear harm.
substances was the big thing. I wasn't taking care of myself with exercise or sleep. I wasn't eating well. All of those things play a factor, and whether or not you have a mental illness or not, if you're not doing those things properly, then
basic
you
needs.
could lead a life that's dysfunctional because of those things, and it could be completely separate from any genetic
Pathology. Yeah.
pathology. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that you'll hear a lot in the Middle East, like they don't understand why America has such a huge mental health illness, and there are a lot of factors that go into it. One is income inequality. Income inequality is a huge factor in whether a community has mental health discrepancies, and that's not only for people who are poor. That's also for people who are rich too. If there's a
True, but if
huge
there's no infrastructure to support the mental health, wellness, whatever, then even the people who have the money can't access it because there's nobody to go to.
Yeah, but this is and this is that's true too, but this is like
More than
on
that.
a psychic level, because it's sort of like keeping up with the Jones. You're comparing yourself constantly to other people who are like your neighbors who are spending money or have this and have that, or your how do I explain the best way to explain it? So there was this case study of Roseto, Pennsylvania, that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. I think it's in The Tipping Point. And this city was a city of Italian immigrants, and they were having lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of mental illness, lower rates of hypertension, higher life expectancy. And they were wondering why this immigrant community, who was not wealthy and not well connected and didn't really have hospitals or anything that would make you think they'd live longer, why they were living longer. And what they found was the communities were really well put together and close, in that showing off wealth was a huge no-no in that community. And that if people weren't wealthy or had trouble feeding themselves, people would go out of their way to make sure they lived up to a living of standard that was typical in the community. So all of those things led to better mental health outcomes, even though their diet, their exercise, their sleep was still the same. So one of
That sounds like
the
love. That sounds
yes,
like it proves love makes a difference in some way.
yeah, that's a
I may be
big
so bold.
a big factor in any type of health outcomes, is the depth and breadth of your social connections. So whether you're connected to family, if you have a lot of friends, there are benefits and cons of any social structure, but the individualism that we have in the Western world and in America can make us feel very isolated, and that's a problem. And that's something in the system that we have to fight very consciously and make sure we're connecting to family and connecting to friends.
I agree with you there. It's really hard to know these days how to connect, I think, with people because we're all kind of grieving something, like we're all dealing with some kind of loss, whether it's like actual somebody has died or even sort of a diagnosis, even having to like change your routine because you could no longer afford to go get your like morning coffee. That can cause a little bit of sadness. You kind of have to learn how to move through that. But we're just right now, it seems like we're being called to do that constantly, keep
Yeah.
regulated constantly. So it's just,
Well,
but I
COVID,
agree with you that like we can't do it individually. Like we can't keep ourselves regulated. We need to start co-regulating a little bit more and sort of, yeah, I think being accepting of the neurotypes, the differences but also the similarities. Like the same kinds of grounding exercises that'll work for you will probably work for me, assuming we have like similar sensory profiles,
Yes.
which I think we do just listening to you. But yeah, so I really think that part of communication needs to be less about like being perfect and knowing exactly what to say and more about just like the outcome is I just want to be more connected to you. So how do we do that?
And I think a problem that people may have. So when I was in college, I had a bad breakup, and there was good that came out of this, and there was bad that came out of this. But I did the pickup artist scene for a while, and some of it was really, really unhealthy. Some of the mindsets, it's changed a lot in like the last 5, 10 years, the type of dating coaches that are out there. But the original pickup artists had very manipulative mindsets. And I found myself getting success, but also turning off certain people, creeping out certain people.
Yeah, success, but at what cost?
Yeah, exactly. And but I started getting more and more into psychology and how to approach people. And as the movement sort of went in a more healthy direction, I read people like Mark Manson's Models, Attracting Women Through Vulnerability. I read I'm trying to think of somebody else who would be good for people to know. Style and Mystery and Real Social Dynamics, and all those guys who came out around like 2004, 2005. Their um their approach is very much psychopathology, using narcissism and Machiavellism and sociopathy to attract women, and it is super unhealthy for you, and you're not gonna be happy if you go down that road.
I
But
mean,
there
I
are
think
better people.
as someone who was a teenager right around that time period, the 2004, the 2000s era, yeah, the dating scene was terrible. There was a lot of harm that was being done to young girls, young women at that time when like the internet was just starting as well. And there were no laws like in place to protect our likeness even
Yeah.
from people doing stuff like that. Crazy. Sorry, I should move on before I
But you know what the likeness thing is? I had one of my friend's sister posted a picture on Facebook of her and her stillborn baby, and it got picked up by a major blog because it was considered like when you post on Facebook, you don't own the rights to that image. So they posted her picture of her and her stillborn baby on this major blog, and like tons of people saw it. And it was just
they were
very
able to
traumatic
monetize
for her.
it without any compensation for her, right?
Yeah, and it's I don't think they could have paid her enough to
Well, that's true,
share
but
that
they
image.
didn't even ask, did they?
No, they didn't ask.
Yeah, and that does make a difference. But like, I don't know, I just said this yesterday. Business like the the language of business and the language of relationships don't mesh. They are very often at odds with each other. And so everyone who is in business right now should be considering that. Like
Well,
to what degree am I like sacrificing relationships?
I think that when businesses think about the long term and think about what really makes them successful over the long term instead of the short term, is having quality relationships with their clients that survive over time. And some people are so focused on the short term that they'll sacrifice that to push their product. And I think ultimately that's self defeating. And I feel like the early pickup stuff was some of that same short term
Yes.
thinking that went against some of the healthier relationships and the better outcomes you could get from just being somebody who's genuine, thinking about what you like in a girl and appreciating her for showing those qualities that you like. James Marshall does a very good job of this. He's a dating and life coach from London, but he is all about like, I like this about you, this is like what I'm into. He talks about qualification and having a set of standards, and if the girl meets your standards in some ways, you just make it known and you're very upfront with your intentions. And he's more into short-term dating, but he has been married, and that sort of approach works for long. I'm more into longer I have a girlfriend right now, but I'm more into longer term dating at this point in my life, and that approach is like really, really helpful and really allows you to see people as individuals with their strengths and weaknesses.
I love that. I'm so glad that we veered into that tangent somehow. I feel like we could segue really easily back by talking about why you're getting into life coaching.
So part of it is just purely financial. The I love doing the TMS and I love doing poetry, but that it
We need more income streams.
I need more income streams, and I need something. I want to get married and have children at some point, and it's just not possible for me now to help out in the way I would want to help out without a different job. So life coaching, I've taken years to learn how to master skills and learn how to learn, and applied that to my poetry career. And I want to be able to teach those mastery skills to people who are looking to advance in their career or looking to advance a hobby, or just like to learn for learning's sake.
Amazing. Yes. Yes. Who sort of would be your ideal client? Like, who do you enjoy working with?
I think my ideal client would be somebody who's in the position I'm in, that's like middle aged and looking to make
Stop
a
it. You are
career
not middle
switch.
aged.
What?
I said stop. You are not middle aged.
I'm older than I look. I'm
Listen, my
I'm
10-year
getting
old told me that I'm officially middle aged now, but like, I think he's just being mean. I don't
to a
want to die
10-year-old
at
like a
70.
20-year-old is ancient. You don't seem middle aged to me at all, but I'm 38, so I'm like I'm 2
No.
years. Yeah.
No, I feel you though. It's so hard for us. What state are you in?
Massachusetts, you're in Connecticut,
So
right?
expensive. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that makes a lot of sense also given your story. We want to be in well-resourced states because it's like safe here, but also it's really hard to survive here. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people who even kind of have a disability are struggling right now, let alone people who are actually surviving off of disability benefits, but like they can't even get married.
Yeah.
Because they'll lose their
Yeah.
benefits. And that's why I've even started. Anyway, nope, that's a tangent. We're not doing that. When you bring too many social justice issues into the thing, it just sort of like, it's like, what are we talking about here? Anyway, okay, amazing. I love that you're talking about coaching. So we haven't talked yet about your career as a TMS technician. So again, I'm going to say transcranial magnetic stimulation is sort of a treatment method. I'll let you talk about it some more, but it's sort of a treatment method that they're exploring for all sorts of mental health conditions, particularly depression. Yeah, again, you can talk a little bit more about how it works, but first of all, I want to know, how did you get into that? How did you
So
know about that?
my dad owns the psychiatric clinic. He sort of fell into psychiatry, but I think it was
Yeah.
fated because we were talking about the genetic background of some of these illnesses. My grandfather, who I shared a name with, had a very hard life. He was literally tortured in Syria because of his political views, and he fled to Libya and was there as a judge in Libya for a while, and then Gaddafi took over, and he was fearing for his life. But anyways, he went back to Syria, and I still don't have the full story around this, like what was the motivation. But my grandfather tried to commit suicide, and my father found him and saved his life and got him into the hospital. And I think it was natural because of that circumstance for my father to find himself in psychiatry. So, my father, after I graduated college, I was sort of lost in writing a ton, but not making money for it. So my father was like, we have this, he's very cutting edge when it comes to treatments for psychiatry. So he was like, we have this treatment called TMS. You'll be in with the patient and you'll be able to relate to them because you've had these mental health issues. But also, if they're not talking or if you have time between patients, you can work on your writing. So it was sort of the perfect fit in that way. So I was able to pursue my hobby and get some money and do something that was meaningful at the same time. So he was really smart in recommending that for me.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a good fit. It's sort of novel, it's new, it's that curiosity, scratches that curiosity thing. That's cool. So, have you ever had the TMS done? Just curious.
No, so the medication works for me, and it's not approved in the US for bipolar, although they use it overseas for bipolar. Right now in the US, it's only approved for major depressive disorder and OCD. And even the OCD, the insurance companies don't cover for it, so you either have to pay out of pocket
What
or
is their,
hope.
hold on, hold on. I don't even care about the insurance companies. What is their justification for only approving it for depressed patients and OCD?
Oh,
Why are
well,
they so
there's
special?
the FDA is just a lot more red tape than a lot of these
Yeah.
other countries, and my suspicion is, and I don't know this to be the case, but it's sort of just a suspicion I have, is that the pharmaceutical companies are lobbying the politicians not to allow TMS to do other sorts of disorders because it will cut into their profits. That's a suspicion I have.
Very.
I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah, there's definitely some people in my network that I can ask about this. I honestly, I am extremely blown away still by the amount and sort of variation of people who have reached out to me wanting to talk and be on this podcast. Like you, but also another person who sort of owns a TMS clinic in Connecticut somewhere. So I think when he comes back, I'm gonna ask him a little bit more about that,
Yeah.
but in a really nice way and not at all in a way that will threaten his career.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh my gosh.
We have had
An incredible conversation.
prescribers who have told us, outside prescribers, not from our clinic, who have told us that they didn't want to send somebody for TMS because they were worried the patient was going to get better and that they wouldn't have the patient anymore. That's verbatim been told to us.
I am not surprised. I am working on a little essay for myself about how the Hippocratic Oath is dead because we forced doctors to be business owners. And so I know. Isn't that tragic?
Yeah, it really is tragic.
Okay, great. So, yeah, this has been an amazing conversation so far. But before we end, I want to make sure I go back to this thing we've talked about a couple of times, but I don't know if we've recorded it yet. Neurodivergence, the evolutionary benefits of some of these traits, yeah, talk to me about that. Because, yeah.
So these traits wouldn't exist if they weren't evolutionary beneficial, at least at some point in time, but they probably are now. It's a lot like how a lot of sub-Saharan African populations have sickle cell anemia. That's because when there was malaria, the people who survived from the malaria were people who had sickle cell. So a lot of like OCD is a lot of evolutionary psychologists are saying how OCD could have developed when the person in the village was looking out for like the wolves and the predators at night and couldn't stop thinking about the predators and therefore protected the village and therefore was seen as a valuable member of the village.
God, but then, like, yeah, the people who might have bipolar and might have disrupted sleep, or even ADHD or autistic people, so many people have disrupted sleep. Like, yeah, we were all the people who watched out at night.
Yeah.
I've even read research about how people used to sleep in batches. Like we would sleep for like 4 hours and then be awake and then sleep for another 4 hours.
So that's actually people who have um disruptive sleep like that at the end of each REM cycle. They're remembering their dreams better. They're problem solving during their dreams and they're waking up, checking things out, eating food or doing things that humans are evolutionarily supposed to be doing at that time, but we're not anymore because we have all this blue light in our life.
Yeah, I'm a mom, so I'm tired all the time, and people just use that as an excuse. But I finally got one of those fitness trackers, and it told me that I do wake up so many times throughout the night, but I don't always remember it. And I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think there's like something to the pattern of just forcing yourself to go back to sleep. And then, I used to have the terrible habit of grabbing my phone and like looking on it for God knows how many hours. And now I'm not sleeping enough. And, there's all sorts of ways that, yeah, we can artificially manipulate our natural cycles.
Yeah.
But
So go
another thing that you were saying is going back to some of the strengths that ADHD people, is that when you were going to bring in the
Yeah, so ADHD people would have been very useful on hunts because they would have been distracted by
picking up all that stimuli?
any disturbances in the environment that could have been predators or could have been prey, or they would have picked up on that, and they would also hyper focus on times of like, okay, we have to get this animal, let's hyper focus on getting this animal and doing it the right way. So their shifting attention would have been adaptive instead of maladaptive in that environment. Bipolar people are like artists, and like the original artists, they would have been painting on the caves, they would have been religious, spiritual leaders of their tribe. And I think that I'm not sure as much about schizophrenia, but I think that would apply to schizophrenia too. Sort of this
Yes.
deeper connection to
Perceptual differences.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the kindest way to say it, right? Just differences in perception. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I don't want to get into the social justice area of schizophrenia and how we had a huge influx of African Americans diagnosed with that sort of in the 60s and other sort of activist families, regardless of color.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's such a challenge because psychiatry at its roots is such a like white supremacist science.
Yeah, I'm going over multicultural diversity
It's been
classes
so
and
good to hear like other perspectives about quote unquote mental illness because yeah, lately I've been seeing a lot more people talking about this from a different lens. Like how
yeah,
yeah.
so what is maladaptive in one community can be adaptive in another community.
Yes.
And that is something because psychology as we think of it now is a very Western European conception of individualism and individual striving. But if you look at religious philosophies throughout time, those were the psychologies of their time, and they're still the main psychologies now, even beyond this. So when you look at different ethnicities, they don't feel the need for mental health treatment because their needs are being met, and sometimes they will come to mental health treatment as sort of a last resort, but their needs are being met in other way through religion or family or friends or acquaintances or pastors or religious figures. And it's sort of this isolated individualistic Western philosophy that we now go into psychology, and I think that has to do with a collapse of communal meaning. And because I'm
And the third
Christian.
spaces.
What?
And like third spaces, like places to go that aren't work and home.
Yeah, that it's a huge problem that we're so focused on working and just going home and like throwing on the TV or like communicating completely via internet with people and being isolated and getting into arguments with people on the internet, which makes you feel more disconnected when really people are more similar than dissimilar, no matter what culture or what gender or what political leanings. People are more similar than dissimilar in their orientation to the world. Everybody has similar experiences, young, old. So everybody's just trying to make meaning, and we've had this collapse of meaning in our society. And I'm Christian, so where I go to get my mental health support is not a therapist. I go to my church. And I think a lot of people have lost out on that sort of community. So that's where the mental health field has sort of come in, and that's good to
Like
have it.
psychology
It's
is trying to replace community.
yeah. It's
Good luck.
I wouldn't say psychology is trying to replace community. I would say psychology is trying to rebuild meaning in people's lives that haven't set up a hierarchical, because it's easy when
I
you're in
see.
a
I see what you're
community or a
saying.
collectivist society to determine meaning because the meaning is there spelled out for you in a very explicit way. But when you're an individual trying to make your own meaning, you have to bounce and be very deliberate. And there's nothing wrong with this, but you have to bounce and be very deliberate about your approach to the meaning making that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would revise my previous statement by saying capitalism wishes psychology could replace community.
Yeah. Yeah.
But humans can't have their needs met solely by their emotional needs met solely by a therapist, I don't think. I do agree that we need to go back out into our communities, but I do also know that those free accessible community spaces are disappearing, and so I would love to help rebuild them. That's why we're having these conversations. We're like trying to talk about what are our similarities. I mean, you and I have different ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah.
We definitely come from different class backgrounds, from like a truck driver family,
Yeah.
but we have a lot in common. And
Yeah.
I feel like I understand you.
Yeah.
Like having empathy for you is not difficult at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, so maybe we just need to show people that that is possible. We're
Yeah.
not special. Like, everybody can get along like this. Come on, y'all.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, well, I've asked you enough personal questions, but before I let you go, I am going to ask you one more.
Okay.
I have these cool cards from this company called We're Not Really Strangers. They just do like relationship building cards and stuff like that. And I suck at coming up with examples on the spot. So I like having a prop. So I'm just sort of shuffling my prop. Okay. What about your current life would your childhood self be in awe of?
Well, I think so. When I was 16, read this poem by Billy Collins called Marginalia. Billy Collins was the former poet laureate of the US. And I was like, okay, I want to be a poem. That poet made me want to be a poem. And about I forget what year it was. I was like late 20s. I got into and took a workshop with Billy Collins. So that was a pretty amazing experience to have the person that made me want to be a poet commenting on my poem. And one of the poems he actually took, and because I know his stylistic, I've taken all of his writing advice and know his stylistic preferences. So I purposely brought in something I thought he wouldn't like to see how he would react to it. And he made a disgusted face at first, and then he was like, he launched into this story. When I was speaking one time, U.S. Merwin, who is also a former U.S. poet laureate, was in the audience, and I was reciting this poem, and I could just tell on the look of U.S. Merwin's face that he was like, "What are you doing to poetry?" So I thought that was funny how he made a
Full
statement about the
circle.
poem not working, but for him, but how he related that in that people have different subjective tastes and that it could work for other people, and he just encapsulated that in this beautiful story. So
That is
that
such a
was really
special.
meaningful to me.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked that one. Wow. Yeah, I'm always a little bit worried to ask someone like a question like that. But yeah, that's great. Awesome. Amazing. Well, how can people get connected with you? Where can they find you on the internet?
So you can add me. I still got a lot of space on Facebook, and I'd love to just have you as a personal friend on Facebook. Just message me saying where you found me. That's Seif-Eldine, and my initial of my last name. Or you could email me directly at seifeldine@gmail.com. And my first name's pronounced Seif-Eldeine. I know Sarah did a great job with it, but I know the spelling doesn't look anything
I
like
was very confused. I asked you how to spell or how to say it first, and I was like, really? But that's so
that.
easy. What do you
I'm
mean?
blaming my dad for that one.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, that's all right. We all, I lucked out, I guess. I got like the waspiest name, but
My name's not popular in the Middle East at all. It's
yeah, I mean,
it's
there's
a
like probably
very
50
rare.
million Sarah Russells on Facebook. Like, you could search me up and you probably won't find me, but good luck.
Yeah.
I'm there.
There are a couple of other Seif-Eldeines I've seen on Facebook, but it's a very not even in the Middle East. It's a very rare name.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sarah. It was awesome.
Wonderful. And for everybody listening, go be awesome, be well, do good. Bye. Thanks for being here. If you want to connect with the Neurodivergent Report, you can find us at ND Report Pod on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, Substack, etc.
If you're looking to support the show, the best thing you can do is subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Please do that.
And hey, if you want to check out more about us, visit our website at ndreportpod.com. And you can also go there if you want to be a guest contributor on the show.
Until next time, be well, do good.